Welcome to Still with Purpose. This is Amanda and Christy.
Our goal is to dig deep and discuss real, raw subjects in pursuit of greater self-awareness, positive transformation, and healing, and to link arms and journey with you as we discover purpose and passion in life together.
Before we jump in, we'd like to ask if Still with Purpose has ever helped you feel seen, encouraged you to heal, helped you to breathe a little deeper, think differently, or reminded you that you're not alone. Please take a moment to follow the show, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you believe would get great value from it.
That simple act helps this message reach more humans, and we are so grateful for every single one of you walking this journey with us. We're so glad you're here. Let's get into today's conversation. Welcome back. Today on Still with Purpose, we're talking about this question. If today were your last day, would your legacy be love or bitterness? Amanda, what quote do you have for us?
Pain is inevitable, but how we let it shape us is a choice. I'd like to talk about the hard topic of grief today. I know Christy has had some huge losses this year, and I have had many in my lifetime. I personally feel like no matter what loss you have, it brings up every single loss you've ever had, and it spaghettis together. Then you grieve differently for each one, but you have all of them coming up at the same time. One year I had 8 funerals in a matter of a couple months. It's very hard to know how to grieve in something like that because it was all sorts of death situations. It was everything you could think of.
Similarly, when I took bereavement this January, I realized every January for the last 3 years, I've taken bereavement time. That
Yeah.
interesting. The month of January has been not a great one in my world, except for I do have a daughter that was born in January. So
I was too.
that's the happy part of the month. But otherwise, It's been a pretty bleak month.
I had a person say, this is actually a mentor of mine. He said one time, unfortunately, with grief, the immediate family and friends, it could be months to years. But for everyone else, the next question is, when am I going to eat again? And it's just so human in the sense of life goes on. The world keeps spinning. Bills are still coming. Problems are still coming up. You still got to take your kids everywhere. Life happens. But for the ones grieving, life completely stops.
That's one of the hardest things to deal with. We've talked about that in my family. Why is everyone else not stopping? Because our world's been shattered. So it seems strange to go to the mall and everyone's just living life. You know, you see it all around you, but yet in our bubble, life stops.
That's kind of back to the proverbial deep end of the pool and the shallow end. The shallowness of human nature when you're grieving is almost unbearable. And I think possibly why we isolate, because I don't actually want to hear you talk about the shirt you just bought when I'm grieving. I could care less. And also, people's lives keep going. They're not going to have your grief be the topic of their conversation for the rest of their life. And it's so brutal to walk through.
And I used the mall example because we actually had to do that. I went with my daughter to look for clothes to wear to a funeral service, and we were both heavily grieving. And, you know, you just see normal, mundane things going on around you. And it's like everything just kind of makes you angry almost.
I think this is an important part of grief that needs to be talked about is how to act when someone's grieving. And since you've just recently gone through this, I think you're going to have some interesting feedback on this. But my experience is that people don't know how to act when you're grieving based on results. And it ends up being super awkward a lot of times. And statements that are not really that great are said because it's just awkward and they don't know what to say or do. And from my experience, I would say that most people, they don't want you to act like everything's normal, but they want you to act normal. So if you have a very fun relationship, I don't want you to lose that when I'm grieving. I need you to recognize that I'm grieving, but also we have a fun personality and we're going to keep having fun. And if I start crying out of the blue, you're totally cool with what I'm doing because you're not fixing it.
Yeah.
And the no laughter thing. So my stepbrother passed away when I was in college, and I came home for the funeral for that weekend. And also my dad got married the same weekend. So it was 2 polar opposite events happening in 2 days time. And apparently my roommate told the whole floor we lived on, don't talk to Amanda. She's grieving. This is what happened. Don't ask her questions. Basically, And I know it was out of wanting to protect me from stupidity, basically, because she has a personality that would not be okay with the questions that normal people ask or whatever. But it ended up being really odd because I came back home and people would go on the other side of the sidewalk. They would not try and run into me at all. And there was no humor, there was no fun. And it ended up being extremely hard to actually work through my grieving because now I'm like, what is going on with everyone?
Yeah.
I just need people to be normal. So I'd love to hear what you think about that.
That's exactly right. I think too, the people who feel like they have to fix situations are the most awkward when it comes to grieving because there's really nothing that you can say. You can't fix it. You can't change it. You can't help really. You just, like you said, just be there and be like you always would have been around me, but be okay if I'm not okay. And that's the best you can do, but you can't say anything or do anything that's really gonna help. But also, you don't want to hurt the situation by trying to completely avoid it.
Right.
Because, I mean, somebody who's already hurting is going to feel even more hurt if the normalcy that they have always come to expect is now gone too. They've got one normal thing if they've lost someone that's completely gone.
Yeah.
So I rely on the normalcy of other things to get through that gap in normalcy that's never going to be the same.
So walking on the other side of the restaurant or to avoid someone who's grieving is just insane to me because this is an elephant in the room situation, correct? It's something horrific has happened to someone. A huge loss has happened. You don't know what to say or do. Great. We're clear on that. You don't need to say or do anything.
Right.
If you could actually not avoid me and start with a sentence that abolishes the elephant in the room. Hey, just wanted to let you know I'm praying for you. If you need anything, please reach out.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the details of what we need to discuss in our situation right now that's happening. That's how you get around these really tough situations. And you don't ignore the elephant in the room. You
Right.
call out the elephant in the room. Do you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Call it out in a supportive way. Yep.
Not, there's nothing worse to me than the sad face.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
It's just like, oh my gosh, I actually am going to avoid you now because I don't want to look at that face every time I walk by.
I know people just don't know what to do. It's a
No.
situation that you don't really want to learn how to be good at, right?
And also the part of curiosity. People just are so curious. They have to have the details of what happened. Do not ask the person that is grieving about details. You don't actually need the details in order to function at life. And there's nothing worse to me than having to stop and explain details that don't matter to you, pretty much.
Mhm.
And it's hurting me more to actually discuss the details.
Again, it's not going to change anything. Everyone's still going to be hurting that was close to the person that is now gone. Sharing details only alleviates the curious person's mind. It doesn't help to alleviate anything for the person who's grieving.
And then if you don't know the correct details, don't talk about them.
No, it's not your story to tell.
Making it a worst case scenario because you think you heard something or this is what you're putting two and two. Being a private investigator is probably the worst way to support a grieving person.
Right.
In making up details that actually aren't the truth. And that's just my experience on grieving. And I definitely wanted to talk about this subject because you've actually gone through some pretty profound loss this year. And I personally think it's important to talk about it because if people are given tools on how to love on a grieving person, geez, if I could help one person in that area, I want to talk about it, right?
Agreed.
So going back to the quote, pain is inevitable, but how we let it shape us is a choice. That really means to me, what are you going to do with your grief? Definitely it's a process and you get to choose what it looks like a lot of times and how long it takes or what it entails for you personally as the grieving person. But I think there's some deeper things to think about is how are you going to choose to live your life and honor that person for one, but how does that person's life and their legacy going to push you forward in your life? And how can you actually make it a choice that fuels and motivates you over, I mean, I've seen some people never come alive. They die with the person and it's so brutal to watch.
I've seen that too. I mean, that's a tragedy for the person living, of course, because their life could amount to so much more. But it's also a tragedy for the person who has passed on.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not what they want their life. Or I wouldn't think, and I'm speaking for myself, I would not want my life to be the reason that somebody else's life was less than it should have been. I want my life to be the reason that somebody else is motivated to be their best selves and accomplish their best accomplishment. I want my life to be an inspiration, not be the memory that makes somebody else not fulfill their purpose.
The test or the horrificness that happened or the loss turns into a testimony of some sort in the future to reach back and help others.
And it can be a great one or it can be not great.
That's how the MADD, M-A-D-D, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, she started a whole thing on that to help people in that situation. You give more information or combat it or put more laws in place and use it for good, just like God does with all of our pain. I wanted to talk about too, when you're grieving, I've heard many people, I just happen to be someone that people talk to when they're in grieving because I just act normal and they finally find someone that's just like, cool, I can just be normal. But the judgment that you have on yourself, possibly when you're grieving, is that you need to be sad for the rest of your life, or else people will think that you didn't love that person or miss them. And my understanding is I need to be given the space to laugh when I want to laugh and cry when I want to cry and not have any judgment on it. And if that's in the middle of a grocery store, awesome, because I just want to live in the moment and walk through the grief instead of bury it, put it under a rug, just let it build up till I absolutely lose my mind. Instead, I rather not judge and control my emotions. When you're trying to control not crying and then you just completely explode, right? So I would say that my understanding or what I came to see as the most helpful as I'm grieving is just allow myself to laugh when I want to laugh and cry when I want to cry.
That's probably the best way we can handle ourselves, just allowing ourselves to feel what we need to feel and let it come out rather than trying to stifle it, because eventually it's going to.
But be a good steward of checking in with yourself. Where are you at? Are you hiding? Are you isolating? Are you avoiding? Are you numbing out? Are you allowing people to support you? Or you're choosing into everything or everything good and you're actually being supported well and you're grieving and not having a judgment on it. Back when I was doing seminars that were 100 people, this is the year I had 8 deaths and funerals in 1 year. I think 2 of them were family members, but the rest were people I've met through the seminar work. So I would say some people have said, I'm going to not put myself out there in love because I don't want to get hurt. And we just talked about this last week. Brokenness and love go hand in hand. Personally, I was meeting 50 to 100 people a month at seminars. So of course, I'm going to up my average of loss. Does that mean I should not reach out and be a light in someone's life because I'm afraid of loss in the future? And I would say, no, love hard, man. Love for the rest of your life and love people hard. And there will be loss, period.
That's what makes loss so difficult. The more you love someone, the more difficult the loss is. You know, it's just part of the cost of loving. But life is so much better with love. So why would we want to forsake that so we don't feel the pain?
You don't regret loving hard on the people you've lost, right?
No, it's definitely the opposite. If you don't show the people that you love how much you love them and then they're taken away.
That's regret. That's true regret. I agree with that. So the quote I love is, as I gave love, I received it back in abundance. And that exchange created undeniable joy. And the opposite of joy is sorrow. And scripture says there's a time for everything. We're going to have the polar opposite of everything, joy, sorrow. So when you've gone through and gotten on the other side of grief, and you've come out as whoever you are, you're a changed person. Your life will never be the same after that loss. But is it for good or bad? You can ask yourself some questions. Are you approachable, safe, loving toward others? Or are you the opposite, closed off, isolated, and not receptive of anything? Are you letting pain harden you or soften you? If today were your last day, what would your legacy be? Would it be that you quit completely, or that you kept going with courage and and strength and really stuck to that you have a legacy to lead and not dying with the people that you've lost. If I can encourage anyone with this podcast about just keep going, like don't judge yourself on the process, but definitely have things in place to keep you going toward the good of what you have to leave the world.
So there's loss in death, but there's also loss in relationships. There's loss of trust. There's loss of respect. There are losses that we grieve that are not just deaths.
Yeah.
So your question of are you letting pain harden you or soften you makes me think through all the different types of losses. Maybe some have hardened me, some have softened me. But it's interesting to reflect back on who I became after experiencing different losses.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I was definitely going down one path, and grief is so much more than just death, but it is the loss of dreams, the loss of relationships, the loss of your old self, even.
Yes.
Because to become the person you need to be in order to accomplish what God's called you to do, you will die to yourself. And that's hard when that's your identity or when you go through identity shifts. I'm not a single mom anymore. I'm a single woman with adult kids. That's a completely different description. That means I don't make all my choices for my kids mostly. Now I'm starting to make them for, yes, of course, my choices could affect my kids, but now it's all me to figure out what I want to create with the losses I've had.
Yeah.
And I tell you right now, this is why I wrote my book, because I wanted to do something good with the loss.
See, and I think in one sense, maybe you are hardened, more determined, and you're not going to let anyone get in your way of writing that book.
Yeah.
But you were softened in that you're more vulnerable and willing to share about those experiences. So, it's, what is that? The scripture, I'm going to botch it, that we're basically being shaped with what kind of fire? Refiner's fire, right? We're being molded. So I think we have some sharp edges and soft edges, and all of these experiences and losses are defining those edges.
And we talked about this last week. He's right there with you in the loss. And I would beg you guys to go to him, and not walk through grief by yourself. If you are physically by yourself, I have been a lot of times because I didn't feel it necessary for my young kids to be counseling me through my losses at the time. I didn't feel like that was appropriate, but man, I did a lot of crying after 7:30 when they went to bed when they were younger. And now it's like, I want God to walk me through it because I don't want to end up on the end a bitter, old, mean hag, basically. That's not my ultimate goal. And I'm committed to my ultimate goal, which is to be the best me that I can be. And it is the grief that has created me to be a phenomenal person. Do you have anything else you would want to tell the human race? Because you are actually really in grieving right now.
I think people always ask, how are you doing? When it comes to grief after the loss of someone, I hear that all the time. How are you doing? And it's thoughtful to hear, but my answer is always the same. Good days and bad days. Really, it's good minutes and bad minutes.
Yeah.
Grief washes over you so quickly. In some cases, you don't even realize it's coming, and it can happen so fast. So I guess just, being aware of that when you're around someone who's grieving, it can change in a second. And that's okay. That's how grief is. But, again, the fact that it's shaping us as we're going through those moments, it'll be interesting to see in another month, in another 6 months, in another year, if those moments are fewer and farther between. I don't know. We don't really know what to expect with grief. We don't have a playbook on it. It's another example of how we've got to walk closely with the Lord and trust in him and take it all back to him.
You actually reminded me of the idea of people that were told at a young age when someone had passed away or divorce or something lost to never speak on this again. And I think I made a vow at a very young age when I heard a story like that no, I'm going to speak about it as much as I want. And I'm going to walk through the grief because I can tell you right now, after sitting in so many seminar rooms, these kind of stories come up, heartache and grief and where they got stunted in life, basically. And I would say the people that haven't moved forward never walked through their grief. They ignored it or drank it away or did whatever. So I would challenge you to absolutely walk through it because it will come up over and over again. But when you walk through the grief, it starts out as a debilitating crash of a wave that's drowning you minute by minute, like you said. And then it never goes away. The ocean keeps coming back and forth. Eventually, it might be lapping at your feet, but it still affects you as a person. But it's not, you're drowning every single day for the rest of your life.
There's just a lot about grief. There's a lot of layers, and it affects everything when you're in it. We experience so many losses throughout our life, and the loss of people is probably the biggest and most traumatic. But I don't think we put enough credit towards the losses that we feel just in everyday things.
Even I've heard it's almost harder to grieve someone that's still alive.
That's an interesting thought too. How many people have kids that maybe are going through substance abuse and they feel like they've lost them and they're still living, or even a spouse? And I think we all just need to be cognizant of there are so many different types of losses that we all could feel and maybe feeling right there in our presence, and we just don't even know it.
So that's an interesting thought. Maybe people avoid you because your loss brings up their loss, which I've definitely experienced. And they don't know, since maybe they never walked through it, if they are close to you in your grief, it might actually break the dam of their grief. And they have been stifling it and hiding it for so long that actually might break them in half. And what's that quote? Be kind because you don't know what people are really going through. And honestly, I feel like we're all grieving something at all times.
Probably true.
So I guess I would leave this podcast on just be kind because you have no clue what's going on.
It's a great way to end our conversation. Let's tack on some reflection questions for the week. First off, where in my heart have I bolted the door shut, and what fear or grief is keeping it closed? And next, which losses have I avoided feeling or naming? And lastly, how can I surrender control of my pain and allow it to soften me instead of harden me?
Well, hopefully this conversation has been enlightening because we get to be better friends and love people more. Hope you have a good week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We know your time is valuable and we're truly grateful you spent part of it with us. We hope this conversation stays with you and helps you move through the week with more clarity, peace, and purpose.
Be sure to visit us at stillwithpurpose.com. And there you can read our bios, sign up for email encouragement and updates on exciting announcements, and also join our private Facebook community.
And if Still With Purpose has encouraged you in any way, please remember to follow, leave a quick review, and share with a friend. It helps more people find these conversations. Have a phenomenal week, and we'll see you next time.